July 2025. A 14-year-old girl was assaulted in Epping by an illegal migrant who had been housed at a local hotel. Within hours, protests exploded into chaos, reinforcing fears that government promises of public safety under Keir Starmer have collapsed. How did a single crime ignite nationwide fury, and what failures let it happen? The truth behind these riots starts here. On the afternoon of July 7, 2025, a 14-year-old girl in school uniform was walking along Epping High Street when she was approached by a man later identified as Hadush Gebrselassie Kibatu, an Ethiopian asylum seeker staying at the Bell Hotel. Kibatu singled out the girl from a group of children, telling her she was very pretty and that age did not matter. He invited her back to his hotel room, urging her to make lovely African babies with him. The girl, frozen by shock, tried to keep her distance as Kibatu persisted with explicit comments and attempts to kiss her. He followed the group through the town, offering them alcohol and refusing to leave them alone. The next day, Kibatu targeted the same girl again as she walked home from school. He repeatedly asked for kisses, tried to persuade her to kiss another child, and touched her thigh while making further sexual remarks. A local woman who had previously tried to help Kibatu with a job application witnessed his behavior and alerted the police. Officers arrived quickly, detaining Kibatu near the Bell Hotel. He was taken into custody that evening. Kibatu denied all wrongdoing, claiming in court that he had only been friendly and had never intended harm. But CCTV footage, along with the clear and consistent testimony of the victims and witnesses, dismantled his defense. The court found him guilty on 5 counts: attempted sexual assault of a child, sexual assault on a minor, incitement of a girl to engage in sexual activity, sexual assault on an adult woman, and harassment. The judge described Kibatu's actions as disgusting and sickening, noting the deep impact on the young victim, who told detectives she had been left terrified and unable to process what happened. News of the assault and Kibatu's arrest spread rapidly through Epping. Within hours, parents gathered outside the Bell Hotel, demanding answers and protection for their children. The sense of safety in the community was shattered. Anger and fear began to ripple beyond Epping, setting the stage for a wave of unrest that would soon sweep across the country. Many residents and campaigners blamed Prime Minister Keir Starmer and his government, accusing them of mismanaging immigration and failing to protect communities. Protesters said this was the predictable result of weak policy and a failure to enforce the law. The mood was urgent and angry, with calls for immediate action to restore safety and hold those in power to account. Crowds began to swell outside the Bell Hotel as word of the assault spread through Epping. By dusk, chants echoed down the high street, demanding protection for children and calling for immediate action. Police vans lined the road, officers forming cordons as tempers flared. Some parents carried homemade signs, others simply shouted, their voices raw with frustration. The gathering, at first tense but controlled, quickly drew in larger groups from neighboring towns. Social media posts called for supporters to join, and within hours, the crowd had doubled. For many, the scene was proof of growing outrage and of a government that had failed to protect its people, with many blaming Keir Starmer and his immigration approach. As night fell, flares lit up the sky above the Bell Hotel. Bottles and eggs were thrown at the building's windows. A police helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight sweeping the crowd. Officers in riot gear moved in to separate protesters from the hotel entrance, but the surge of bodies pressed against their shields. Arrests began. First a handful, then dozens, as scuffles broke out between protesters and police. Sirens wailed into the early morning, and local roads were blocked by barricades of overturned bins and debris. The night was chaotic, and critics said the response from ministers had been slow and inadequate. the unrest in Epping quickly became a rallying point for communities far beyond Essex. News of the protest flashed across national headlines, and similar scenes erupted outside migrant hotels in other towns. In Dublin, a protest outside the City West Hotel turned violent, with a police car set ablaze and over 300 officers deployed to restore order. 6 people were arrested that night alone. The images of burning vehicles and police lines traveled fast, fueling anger across borders. The spread of unrest exposed weaknesses in coordination and preparedness. Calls for accountability grew louder, with each new protest amplifying the sense of chaos. The Bell Hotel, once just a stopover for arrivals, now stood as a symbol of public outrage. For many, the events in Epping were no longer just about a single crime. They had become a flashpoint for a nation demanding answers and a government struggling to regain control. The perceived failure of leadership under Keir Starmer became a central theme, as communities demanded clearer policy and stronger protection for families. Rows of hotels across the UK, once filled with tourists or business travellers, now house tens of thousands of asylum seekers waiting for decisions. At the end of September 2023, government figures showed 56,018 people living in these hotels. By September 2025, that number stood at 36,273, still a staggering presence in communities from Essex to the Midlands. The cost to the taxpayer is enormous. Each night, it is £170 per person for hotel accommodation, compared to just £27 for standard dispersal housing. Over the last year alone, the bill reached nearly £3 billion, draining funds from local services and fueling resentment among families who say they see little return for their sacrifice. Critics argue that the government's promises to empty the hotels ring hollow. Keir Starmer's administration halved the number of hotels in use, but rising arrivals have pushed occupancy rates higher, with some hotels now cramming more than 160 people under a single roof. Local councils complain they are rarely consulted before new placements, and GPS, schools, and police forces are left scrambling to respond as populations spike overnight. The Bell Hotel in Epping is just one example. A quiet business transformed into a holding facility, its presence now a flashpoint for anger. The government's answer has been the creation of a new border security command, billed as a tough, intelligence-led force meant to stop small boats and break up trafficking gangs. The reality on the ground looks very different. More than 30,000 people have crossed the Channel in 2025 alone, with no sign of the promised clampdown. The Home Office touts record workplace raids and civil penalties, yet the flow of arrivals shows no sign of slowing. For families in towns like Epping, these numbers are not abstract. They are daily reminders that the system is overwhelmed, and that promises of control have failed to materialize. For policy critics, the hotel bills and the persistent arrivals are proof of a government unable or unwilling to put public safety first. Courtrooms across the UK have become battlegrounds over who stays and who goes, but the rules are anything but clear. The law, meant to protect rights, now shields offenders from removal. Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, the right to family and private life, has become a lifeline for those facing deportation, even after conviction for violent or sexual crimes. In the Swindon case earlier this year, a judge called the attempted kidnapping of a 17-year-old by a Sudanese migrant sinister and deeply concerning, warning that the public needed protection. Yet the attacker, like many before him, used legal appeals to block immediate removal, exploiting loopholes that frustrate both victims and police. Judges now find themselves forced to release offenders back into the community, or delay removals for months, sometimes years. In Epping, the court's hands were tied. The system allowed Kabatu to remain in the country, housed in a taxpayer-funded hotel until he finally acted. Even after conviction, the question of whether he will actually be deported remains unsettled. Legal barriers, endless appeals, and a tangle of international agreements leave communities exposed, fueling the sense that justice is out of reach. Public trust in the system is collapsing. Recent polling by YouGov shows that fewer than 18% of respondents believe the government is keeping them safe from violent offenders who arrive illegally. Opposition leaders seize on these numbers, branding the government's promises as empty words. Many now point to government mismanagement and to Keir Starmer's leadership, saying he has failed to protect the public. Calls for automatic removal of foreign offenders grow louder, yet the government insists on due process and international obligations. Each new case becomes a rallying cry for reform, yet the cycle repeats. Judges warn that their courts are not equipped to fix policy failures. Instead, they deliver verdicts with a sense of resignation, knowing that the law as written offers little real protection for those outside the courtroom. The moral verdict, voiced by one Swindon judge, was blunt. The public needed protection, and the system failed to provide it. Tonight, public trust in government safety promises stands on a knife edge. As border failures spark outrage, the debate over who pays the price, citizens or politicians, grows sharper. Accountability now defines the political future. In the end, security isn't a slogan, it's a test. Share your thoughts below.